5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Fitter and Faster Coaches Corner. I'm your host, as always, Mike Murray. Today, I'm excited that we are meeting not during an ASCA board meeting, but that we have time to connect on our Coaches Corner episode. My friend, the head coach and owner of Nitro Swimming, Mike Koleber. How are you, Mike?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, it's good to be talking to you. And we're so excited about hiring Jennifer. I think ASCA is headed in a great direction. You've been a big part of leading ASCA through some challenging moments. How excited are you about Jennifer coming in and taking over ASCA and setting our new vision for the future?
I think she is exactly who we need at this point. And it's funny, if you go to any pool deck USA, and I was honestly a somewhat critical of ASCA in the early days when I was beginning coaching, because I'd always heard about it, and they had good publications, I thought, but not much had really changed in my mind. And the knock against ASCA, if you ask any coach, usually it's one of two things. It's it's the old boys network, or they're outdated. Those two things. And in this move, bringing in this CEO with her level of experience and what she does and what she has done in her life, and have the passion for swimming itself, I think ASCA can't go wrong. And you're going to see a new, revived, better offerings, updates, just an outreach where any coach is going to feel like they belong to ASCA. And I'm excited for it. And times had been challenging. The pandemic itself was, not the greatest time to have an organization that relies on presentations and conferences and clinics. And for us to weather through and make it to see this other side, and then to be greeted with someone like Jennifer Lamont as the new CEO, I think the future is very, very bright for ASCA. I'm excited to be a part of it.
I am too, man. And it's been great for this board to kind of gel and coalesce over this time. We've really become close as a board. And so, from as far as the decision-making process for coaches in this country, what a great group we're lucky to share. And I think it's fair to say and let people know that, for those people who thought maybe ASCA was, kind of falling apart in the last couple of years, we had so many applications, Mike, and those applications were of such high quality people. Would you agree with that?
Well, we had 49 was the number, 49 that we had to vet that were strong. I mean, very strong people. There were another 49 or 50 that were still on the hopper that we pretty much said, hey, cut it off. We can't be processing this many folks. We got to figure something out here. We went from 49 to 15 to 7 down to 1. And I was amazed at the level of interest in wanting to bring this back forward into the eyes of coaches actually around the world, not just across the country. And one of the first, I guess, endeavors for our organization is going to be, updating our education platforms, the education certification, really bring this thing up to speed. And that's what I'm most excited about, because, we're not like this giant freighter that can't turn fast. ASCA is large, but it's nimble. And it's like a jet ski, I would think, more so than a cruise liner, right? And it's a cruise liner, but it can turn at a jet ski's moment. And to stay up to date, and you mentioned the board, us getting closer together. You've got board members. It's funny, I can go West Coast to East Coast by memory because I don't have the technical knowledge to be able to put ask a board, click, and get an email to everybody. I do everybody's name individually. So I start with the Daves out in California. Dave, say hello, Dave Marsh, right? I got Jeff Julian, move out of California. I'm sorry, Mark Schubert, move out of California. I hit Jimmy Tierney in Illinois. I've got Ken Heiss in Ohio. I come down to Doug Warham at Nashville. I come down from there. I've got Mitch Dalton at University of Texas. I keep moving eastward. I'm serious. And I get Dave Gibson, Florida, but I got Megan Esting. We've got Braden Holloway at NC State, Matt Kredich at Tennessee. And who am I missing? oh my gosh, they're going to kill me. Chad Onken in Carolina. Did I hit everybody? I think.
Got it.
And so that's just left to right from going West Coast to East Coast. And that's how I process on the emails. But as I type these names, there's still times you kind of pinch yourself and say, gosh, I'm sitting on a board with these people. These are, for me, they're like the upper echelon. I'm like, what am I doing here? And it was funny. I was at an ASCA World Clinic a few years back, and basically someone just tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, you own your own program, right? I says, yeah. I said, I got 2 indoor 50 meters. Holy mackerel, that you should be on the board. I don't know. No, really, you should run for the board. And so you just run at the World Clinic, and if you get the vote, you're in. And fortunately, I don't think there was enough people that were running, because I'm being serious, because I'm not one of those guys that, I don't need to be on the board of ASCA. I didn't need the presidency. It's not one of those things where I want the feather in the cap or the resume builder. I'm at the point of my life, it wasn't that important to me, right? But when there were I don't think there were 3 or 4 board seats open, and there were only 3 or 4 people interested in running for those board seats. Okay, cool. Because I made a decision. If there were 5 or 6 or 7 people running for 3 or 4 slots, I don't want to be a part of it. A, I don't like losing. B, I don't want to be in that position of trying to campaign. Hey, put me on the board. I know everything. That's just not my style. And so I'm on the board. And then a year later, when Mark Schubert comes up and pokes me in, you got to be the president. And I'm like, what? I don't even know Robert's rules. Now, Mike will attest to you guys. If anybody's listening to this, Mike Murray will attest. I'm not a Robert's rules kind of guy. I'm a kind of guy that, tell me what the problem is. I'll try to figure out some solutions. I'll present some options, and we'll try to figure out what the best option is to move forward to get things done. I'm not a real good committee person, meaning I'm not really good at listening to 15 viewpoints. I kind of want to have 3 or 4 people together. Let's make a decision. Let's move. If it's the wrong decision, let's change our minds. Let's do something else. It didn't work. And that's how we've kind of built Nitro over the years. It's my wife Tracey and I, but input from the coaches, and we've got coaches now. It's funny. A coach drove out just now. He's in town to check out our program, and he's interested in becoming a coach with us. And he's from north of Richmond, Virginia. And he writes just a beautiful cover letter. It spoke directly to me. A lot of heart, a lot of passion. Not necessarily, it wasn't X's and O's of, hey, I've accomplished this and I've produced this many. It wasn't that at all. It was just, I could tell it was a guy that was not wanting to go the corporate route. And he swam Division III, and which I love Division III and Division II. I love them all, Division I and II, Division I also. But when you get the guys and the guys and the ladies who have had to work harder and didn't have the natural talent base to bring to the table in their swim careers, I really have come to appreciate the hard workers. They've had to overcome the fact that they can barely streamline, and I was one of those where I swam Division II at the time, Oakland University. They're now Division I with Pete Hovland, who's still coaching, was my coach. Love the guy. And Arturo Albiero came through Oakland. Randy Teeters. There's a whole bunch. Eric Strom, Eric McElwain. These guys have all come through the Oakland, lineage. And Pete Hovland was part of Ernie McGlisco, part of that tree. And it's funny, you have other guys that came through, the Indiana area, and you've got guys that came through the Southern Cal, the Mission, and it's just neat how you come out of these, whatever program you've come out of, that's kind of like your lineage tree, right? And there's all these trees all over the country, which just makes the approaches that you hear so much more interesting. And I swam today we have a handful of us that meet 3 times a week, and we swim 3,000 or 4,000 yards. It seems like a lot, I guess, to a retired swimmer. I'm 56 years old now. And today our main set was 4 500s on 730, 130 base, get the 4, because Friday we're going to do sprint stuff. So it's not a master's group. It's just a handful of us that get together. There's no time limit. We can add a minute when you want to add a minute. We just, it's one of those nice places to get together. And I was just telling a coach today, about, we talk about Sun Yang on his mile when he, aside from the PEDs and everything else, triple breathing into the wall and double breathing out of the wall. A breath, flip, comes off, breath, and then he gets back into his, swim for a whole mile. And I said to my coach, one of our swimmers, he swam with us, and I said, Flo, his name's Florian. I said, Flo, at 56 years old now, who's to say what's the one way to do things? What's the right way to do it? It works for him. Because then we start talking about Tennessee and how I think Tennessee started pioneering recently no underwater pullouts for some of their folks on the 200 IM, maybe 400 IM, I'm not sure. But the 200 IM, they're not doing a pullout. Some of the folks, some of the athletes coming up on breaststroke. Okay, well, who would that benefit? And that's what he asked. So Flo said, well, is that faster? And I said, I think it depends. It depends on lung capacity of the individual. It depends on how fast are they, because he said, well, then you don't want to do a crossover turn, do you? I said, not necessarily. I said, you still might want to do a crossover turn if it's faster, but you don't know. Test. See. Does it work? Does it not work? Who does it work for? Who does it not work for? And you're going to find, I think, this morphing of this sport, USRPT, hardcore distance. Pound them every single day, take some time off. We've had kids that were out of the water for months. You weren't necessarily out of the water because you were a madman. What you guys did in Victor with, swimming outdoors in this 38-degree water, whatever it is, with the wetsuits. And I'm going, holy cramoly, look what Murray's doing with these guys in Victor, right? And you were turning some heads, which was good heads. And, but we had these kids had to take this time off, a lot of time off. And these kids came back faster than ever before. A lot of kids that didn't. So now does that make us question, what's the model? What is the model? Is there a model? Is there one model? Is there multi-models out there? So that's what's so exciting about this sport, because it's changing. Everything's changing. It can always change. Who are the innovators? Is it DeSorbo? Right now at Virginia, when he went super hard for a conference meet, but they voted as a team, hey, we might not have nationals. Let's put our eggs in this basket right now. Great move, by the way. Now, it turns out there's nationals anyways. Well, what happened? These kids came back, and what happened to most of those kids? They swam faster. But he went right back at it. I think I heard he said they took maybe a day conference meet to recoup, whatever. And I think he hit it hard again. Super hard, because he said now as athletes, we're in a position that they should be able to go so much faster now than any other time in the season. But you don't just rest. For him and his group, they went hard, and they pulled back. I think they were doing weights, maybe 3 or 4 days prior to nationals, right?
Yeah.
That to me is unheard of, but it worked. It worked for him. So who knows? This sport's changing, and it's exciting. There's who's in the headlines right now. It really doesn't matter, because stick to something. You keep changing something. It's dynamic. It's fluid. It's exciting. And that's what's great about having these types of forums, to hear what are other guys doing. Back in my day of swimming, we're talking early 80s. And when I finished, actually mid 80s, when I was all done, we had Swimming World. We had a magazine that was once a month, and you would look at the rankings. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember this stuff. We had the rankings, and then you look at the back inside cover to see what Brian Goodell did in the mid 70s, what his main set was out in California, or Hackett, and you see these workouts or Woodhead, or Tracey Calkins, who I believe at the time when it was junior nationals and senior nationals, Tracey Calkins qualified for senior nationals
in every event.
Think about that. You talk about, Phelps, I think would probably be there, right?
Yeah.
Is there anybody else you could think of that could, maybe Carson, Foster? It'd have to be a really strong, maybe Shane, a really strong 400 IMer, I think, or an IMer, obviously, that has a aerobic base that can also hit that mile. But Tracey Calkins, every single event back then, senior nationals. That's amazing. That's crazy. So I love the sport.
It's so fun how the sport has changed, right? And I remember even at, the tail end of my high school years, 97, 98, we were still waiting for Swimming World to come out so we could look at the back and see if we're in that top 16. There was so much anticipation that went into that. And, you hear stories about, Mark Schubert calling Dick Jokums to find out about the main set. Hey, I see what Randy Teeters is doing every other day. He puts it out there. I get to see what he's doing. I'll slide him something. So it's amazing how, innovation and technology has changed the game. And it's been a big part of you at Nitro, Mike. I remember, I think it was like 2010 or 11, the first time I'm like, man, these Nitro kids, they got something good going down here. We were at Junior Nationals, and it's the first time I remember really recognizing the team. And then the next year, you and I were together in Colorado Springs, and that's how we met. And I listened to how you started to put together the vision for the program and the business that, you and Tracey wanted to start. So talk to me about that day where you had this idea that, we're going to do something that's pretty revolutionary in a lot of ways. And we're going to kind of change the landscape of swimming in our immediate geographic demographic. What was that day like?
Well, here's what happened. I moved out here with a corporate job. I got sent out I went from Atlanta, Greensboro, North Carolina for maybe 2 months. And I'm in a meeting with these higher ups. And I was just, a newbie in the company, and your eyes are this wide and your learning curve is going straight up and you don't know anybody. And Tracey and I were dating at the time. And he says in this meeting, and by the way, she was living at the time in Virginia. I'm in North Carolina for 2.5 months, but I was in Atlanta. We were doing the long distance, 4.5 hour, dating thing for about 1.5 years or so at the time. And I'm in a meeting and he says, oh, by the way, we're all getting sent out to Austin, Texas. And my jaw kind of drops down, my eyes get kind of big and my face gets kind of white, whitish pale. And he says, Koleber, he says, you okay? And I said, we'll talk after the meeting. And so after the meeting was over, I talked to him and he said, what's going on? And I said, Austin, Texas, that's Central Time Zone. That's a long ways away. Because I was thinking, my family's all Eastern Time Zone. My parents at the time, when my dad was still alive, they were in Michigan and they went to Florida in the wintertime, and I could hit them from Atlanta either direction pretty easy on a weekend. My brothers, my sister, we're all based over there. And none of us have really truly left the nest to go what we would think a half a country away, Texas. And I'm thinking tumbleweeds, and I'm thinking tornadoes, and I'm thinking cows. And I'm sorry, and dust storms, because that was my impression. And he says, we're going to Austin, Texas. And I called Tracey on the phone and I said, they're sending me out to Austin, Texas. And there's silence. And I didn't know what she's thinking, what she's doing. And she says, I don't want you out there without me. I don't want to be here without you. So really, it's kind of your move. And so we went from engaged to married in 3 weeks. And we moved out to Texas together. And I told the guy that I was working for, I said, as long as I can coach at night, I can scratch this itch, because I wanted to make a difference. And I know it's a long way to go around to answer this question, but I really want to give you a full appreciation for where my thought process was. So he says, no problem, you can coach. That's great. Because I was in a cubicle job for a number of years after college. And I would look out the window. I didn't have a window. I was in a cubicle, but water to make me go to the bathroom so I could actually look out a window as walking down the hallway so I could see what the world looked like outside of this big building, right? And I would see landscapers out there, and they were doing the wood chips and the mulching, and they were doing the trimming the trees and mowing the lawn. And I said, gosh, I'm envious. I was envious of these landscapers because at the end of each day, they could look and they could see what they have accomplished. And they knew that they made a difference. And I was just in a typical position of corporate. For me, it just wasn't for me. It's not for everybody, but it is for some people. It just wasn't for me. And I didn't feel like I was making any kind of a difference. So I sat there, I said, what would I do for free? What would I do if money was no object and didn't have to make any money at all? what would I do with my life? I would teach lessons and I would coach swimming, because my childhood growing up in this environment of the chlorine and the kick sets and the turns and the noise, and you hear that water, you know what it is. You see it. I see it in your face. You're home. When you walk on a pool deck, it's home, and it doesn't matter what state you're in. When you feel that, that's okay. Now I got to figure out a way that I'm going to be at least scratching that itch. So I'm coaching part-time. They went through a couple of coaching changes, and they said, hey, we're going to make you, you want the head coach position. And at the time, my corporate job was kind of tanking. The signs were on the wall. You could see that things weren't going well for this company. And I figured, shoot, I got a 1-year-old now at home. My wife quit her job. She stayed at home. We're living in a 900 and some square foot condo on a 3rd floor overlooking a dumpster. I'm not kidding. This was my life, right? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to quit the corporate job just to be coaching. Single parent. I mean, I'm single income, and I have the health insurance for me, not for Tracey, and not for my son, Cal. And so I said, all right, I'm going to make this thing work. So I supplemented with a ton of private lessons. I mean, a ton. I was going sun up, sundown. You're driving home and you're literally, you got a stack of checks this high because you don't get time to go to the bank. So once a week, go to the bank, and they hated seeing me walk in because they had all these checks I'm cashing I'm depositing, because now we've got a second child on the way. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is so much pressure, right? So I remember going to answer, finally get to the answer to your question. I walked on a pool deck the first time for a meet here in the area, and this was back in the early 2000s. In Longhorn Aquatics, Texas Longhorn Aquatics, they were stacked. It was Circle C, went to TXLA. They had the first 2 or 3 heats. They had the fastest 2 or 3 heats. Was all their team, and we're not anybody's. We're just nobody's team, right? A nobody. And I remember them walking on the pool deck, and I remember seeing it was an invite, and coaches from all over the place were there, and they brought chairs, and they brought newspapers. I'm not exaggerating. It was a Sunday morning session, and I saw some coaches underneath the overhang at University of Texas where the parents can't see them. And they're sitting in these chairs and they're reading newspapers, and the kids are warming up. Back then, there wasn't really that much oversight, making sure the coach is always there, right? And I was astounded that I saw coaches bringing chairs to swim meets. That was the first thing that really shook me in terms of, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And I walked on the pool deck, and this is not an arrogant comment at all. This is just what went through my mind. Is I said, are you all going to make it that easy for someone to come into this area and do it the way I believe it should be done, which is if we expect 100% from the kids, the least they can expect from us is 100%, the coaches. So we don't sit down during practices. We don't sit down during swim meets. Now, of course, if you're just this, it's a small session, you've got maybe 2 or 3 kids total, and there's an hour before somebody swims. It's senseless to be standing right. You're gonna sit, talk, get to know the kids better, because those are special meets that you can bond with swimmers when you've got those opportunities, right? But that's what really made me think, oh my gosh, I'm going to do it. It's going to be here in Austin. So because I was looking for the swim centers. I was looking for the Swim Atlantas. I was looking for the Dynamos. I was looking for the from Atlanta area, right? I was looking for the Marietta Marlins, the Chattahoochee Golds. I'm looking for these teams in the area that had their own facilities. There wasn't one that had their own facility. There were a couple YMCA's, and you got the train out of University of Texas, but there's all outdoor country club municipalities, city pools, renting from the city, whatever. And I told my wife, Tracey, I said, we're going to build a swim center. And she looks at me like with this, disbelief look, and this, how do you expect to do that? Right. And I said, I don't know how. But I know why. And the why, if you've got a why that's stronger than anything else, you figure out how to do things. And so the mistakes that I've made from that time forward have been so numerous. I mean, mistake, right? But you're learning every time you make the mistake. And we purchased a piece of property, put a contract on a piece of property, was going to purchase it. And you go through what's called feasibility, which is this property going to work? And you got to bring in inspectors, you got to bring in the environmental, the agencies, and they test the soils and they do all these things. And the architect does their job, right? And they do their part. So now I'm writing checks, thousands of dollars for these things. And all that private lessons money is going down. When it was all said and done, I thought this piece of property was it. Oh, it's perfect. It's flat. It's a rectangle. It's right in between a Wendy's and a post office. It's access from everywhere. Oh, it's beautiful. We're going to do this. The architect sends me their plans back. And he says, hey, Mike, here's your building. Little change though. We can't give you a lessons pool and a competition pool. We can give you one or the other. So which one do you want? And oh, by the way, you can't have the 160 or so parking spaces. We get you 77. And I said, wait a minute. I need 2 pools. I need this many parking spaces. This piece of property is huge. It's a rectangle. It's perfect. And they said, you don't know what pervious and impervious cover ratios are, do you? I said, what? And they said, pervious and impervious cover ratios. No, don't know what those are. Well, that means if it's a municipality or township or city, whatever, they have certain percentages that you can make concrete, pavement, building. And the other part of the percentage has to be where water can go through, meaning pervious, grass, gravel, dirt, so you just because you see a piece of property doesn't mean you can use that whole piece of property. There's got to be some grass, dirt, which I didn't know. So all of that money that we spent on the contract for that land, on the architect's fees, on all of the environmental, the due diligence that these organizations had to go through, all of it at the end, done. We had to punt on everything. So now, get this. So now we've got 2 kids at home. The wife, who's at home, says to me, I just took our savings to 0. I mean, I had everything I had. I've got nothing. I maybe a little bit of 401k left from the last job I had, barely. I didn't touch that because it's penalties, right? And so we're down to 0. And that's when the wife says to you, she says, are you sure you know what you're doing? And if you've ever seen the movie, The World According to Garp, it's a Robin Williams movie from the 80s. And they're going to buy a house and they're looking at the house and this plane comes out of nowhere and smashes into the house. And the pilot gets out, I'm okay, and Robin Williams says to the agent, we'll take it. And the wife looks at the husband, incredulously. And he says, honey, the chances of this happening again are astronomical. It's already been crash proofed or whatever, something like that. So what I told my wife, Tracey, so Tracey, I just got an MBA just now on how not to proceed with building a swim center. This education, we just paid for my education. And that's the way I looked at it. And so at that point, we regrouped, retrenched, and went out the right way, which was find the investors. There's a whole process that we went through to do it. So long story longer, from napkin sketch to opening up our first location, Nitro Cedar Park, was about 5.5, 6 years. From napkin sketch to this. And it's funny, I still get emails. Hey, Mike, you sat next to me on a Southwest Airlines flight back in such and such. You drew out your facility. It's great to see that you did it. That's kind of cool. This is like, 10, 15 years later that you had these conversations, because when it's in your mind and it's the first thing you think of when you wake up, it's the last thing you think of when you go to bed, is it's got to be burning in you're going to build a facility, and if it's not that way for you, I think it's going to be very, very, it's going to be difficult no matter what, but I don't like your chances if it's not laser beamed in your eyeballs that you can make this thing happen and make it work. So that's when we decided to do it. And having to beg, borrow, and the water time and rely on other people. And, oh, by the way, sorry, it's closed for the week because we got to do this, or sorry, we're going to change the water temperature because of this. Sorry, you can't have a meet because of this, whatever. Sorry, we don't even know if we're going to renew your lease for next year, or the year after. How do you plan if you're a coach with a family and you're in a leased facility, how do you plan that you're even going to be there 2 years from now? You know, you can't look that far ahead because you're worried about, gosh, are we even going to be renewed? And you could be in great footing with a board, with a country club board, with a township board of trustees, you know, whoever it is that you're working with that actually says, yes, you can have the water, or hey, your rate's going to go up a little bit this year, whatever, whoever those folks are, that makeup of that group of people can change. And all of a sudden, for some reason, there's 1 or 2 people now, they don't like you, you know, for whatever reason. Hey, he's too loud. Hey, he's too this, he's too whatever. Hey, it's too messy. Hey, it's too loud. It's the kids make too much noise when they go into the parking lot at night. There's people trying to be on a putting green at a country club and they're hearing the whistles all the time coming from the pool. You know, all those things, if that bothers you enough, it's time to start figuring out how are you going to take charge of your own situation. And that's really what we did. And for us, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Yes, you asked earlier, you know, you want to talk about the hard times. There's tough moments probably every day. But the pleasure I get from owning our situation, we own it, you know, far outweighs the negatives that come along. And there's some pretty big negatives. You know, you get smacked a lot, you know, having your own business. It's tough, but still wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, I love the story, Mike. And one of the things that I appreciate so much is that you bet yourself every day. So what are some of the things that you do from a mental health and wellness standpoint that give you the confidence to keep moving forward?
First thing is, you have to know who's keeping you afloat, right? It's the families. All right, it's your families, it's your parents. And so I'm amazed constantly when I go to clinics and conferences and I'll hear certain speakers, and it always seems like it's the cool thing to do, or it's the easy thing to do, is to talk about how bad swim parents are, how bad my parents are. Oh my gosh, keep them off the deck. I'm like, you know what? I don't know if we're an anomaly here at our program at Nitro, but our parents, we do a really good job from an education standpoint of consistently putting out, you know, say a weekly note, let's say 30 or 40% read it, right? But we go into a championship meet weekend where all the pressure, you know, there's a lot of pressure on everybody, and parents are feeling it. Believe me, the coaches feel it because this is it, right? We hope it all the eggs are in the right basket. Well, the notes that I'll put out to our families are, hey guys, listen, you know what I expect at these meets? And I'll say 1, 2, 5 words. It's just a swim meet. That's the first thing. It's just a swim meet. What does your child want? And what did you want? Even to this day, I'm 56 years old. My mom is still around. My dad passed away, I mentioned earlier. What do I want more than anything else, I think, in the world? The feeling that I get where I feel the best, it's if I know my mom's proud of me. You know, if my dad was proud of me. You know, that's it. Even at 56 years old, to me, my driving force, and it's my wife, is she proud of me? Are my kids proud of me? Right? And that might sound kind of silly. It really isn't about, you know, well, how many age group championships? I don't know. You know, how many, you know, junior national qualifiers this year? You know, I don't know. I want my parents to be proud of me. So I mentioned that to our parents. Guess what your child wants more than anything else? They want to know you're proud of them unconditionally. So when and I write the note, so it's almost like a repeat note every year. I redo it, but same kind of theme, right? I'm actually typing it every time. I don't copy paste, but they're going to blow a turn. Believe me, they know they took 9th and not 8th and didn't get in the A final. They know it before you know it. They know that they twitched on the start they know that their goggles fell off. They know that they didn't get it. They know that they breathed off the wall. They know these things. When they come back to you, you know what you need to do. You hug them, you tell them you love them, and you say that you're proud of them. That's it. If they want to talk about the swim, they'll talk about the swim. Don't critique, Don't bemoan. Don't, you don't need to. And they hear it enough. So now when I'm saying a note, I try not to be too preachy in my notes to our families because that'll turn somebody off, right? So I'm big on third party, third party articles. So I love it when yours I used, by the way, the article you wrote about nationals being canceled again for, I think it was for your daughter, right?
Yeah.
And how she handled it. And I think, did they go out like snowboarding or something, or tobogganing or sledding?
They went
sledding.
Yeah, they went sledding, right? And I used Mike Murray's note, everybody. And he's a friend of mine. Mike Murray's coach at Victor Aquatic Club up in New York. And here's what he just wrote. He's a fantastic author, which I didn't know, honestly. And I put it out to our families because it's third party. And it sometimes is more credibility when you can pull third parties, right? I love Olivier. Leroy. He writes to my heart. And I say, another gem from Olivier. Here's another one from Olivier. Here's another one. And he's on my team notes. At least I do him about once a week. At least 2 out of 4 every month is some point from Olivier. Phenomenal. And
So good.
That's part of the education process. So we go to a championship meet. Hey, parents, I know we can count on you. When you see a parent walking up and down looking for a place to sit, it doesn't matter what team they're wearing. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. If you can find some room, make them feel welcome, and just find a spot for them because they don't have a place to sit. You guys be the beacons, the shining lights out there. I want to be Nitro parents. So with our kids, the number one compliment that I can get as the owner, of Nitro is that, wow, Nitro kids are nice. They're nice. It didn't say they're fast. The number 2 compliment I can get is, wow, they know how to race. But number 1 is nice. And I tell the kids, don't forget what's number 1. Nice first, you know how to race number 2. And so when I educate the parents of saying, hey guys, be wise enough and be smart enough to be looking around and observe other parents' behavior. Observe. I said, don't necessarily get involved, but you're going to see some things that really aren't good for youth sports. You're going to observe behaviors that aren't good. You are all ambassadors of youth sports. You're ambassadors of your family name. You're ambassadors for your kids, and you're ambassadors for the Nitro program. I said, now that's what we want. In those last 5 words again, it's just a swim meet. So that's how I like to do it from a parent expectations thing. But my own mental health, I swim, I told you, 3 times a week with a small group of people. Believe me, that's life-changing. Getting in the water, being immersed around the water with a good group of people that no matter what kind of day you're having, we're going to push each other. We're accountable to each other. That's fantastic. For mental health, you need to take care of yourself physically. I do try to take care of myself in terms of what I eat. And I'm also in the gym 3 other times a week. So 6 days a week, I'm doing something. I usually take 1 day off where I'm not, other than have my 4 dogs and running around the yard with the 4 dogs. But taking care of yourself first. And here's an analogy I heard the other day or a while back from somebody. When you're on an airplane and they're giving the announcements, and they'll say, in the loss of sudden cabin pressure, oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling. Please be sure to secure your mask first before assisting others, right? That's a reminder that if we as coaches aren't taking care of us coaches first, there's not much left in your tank to take care of what's around you. So you do have to have your limits. And there's a very empowering word that I think I could really learn to use more, and I think probably several of you can also, is the word no. I'm sorry, I can't. No, I can't do it. And not to feel guilty, because we're servants, right? And that's in our nature. And we want to serve. And it's hard for us to say no. Hey, hey coach, can I get you one more time over here on this Friday? This Saturday, can I have 2 extra hours with you? And you know that your wife or kids or whatever, your significant others, whatever, or you got to detox. You've got to decompress, and you got to get off that deck, or you're not going to be as good for the people in front of you. So recognize some signs. If you think it's time for a day off, it's time for a day off that deck. And I hope that you have a situation that you can actually do that. In fact, I would think if you're a solo coach out there and you're all by yourself in a program, I would have to think that your parents would understand. Hey guys, listen, there's this Thursday, we're going to shut it down. I'll be back on Friday. I got some personal things I'm going to attend to. You don't need to get personal, right? I've got some personal things I'm attending to. I'll see you Friday bright and early, or I'll see you Friday night. We'll get ready to go twice as hard Friday. Take that Thursday off. Take that Tuesday off, whatever it is. And if you're bored, if you're a board run team, I believe they'd understand it also. So that's my 2 cents for the day.
Oh, so many great nuggets there, Mike. And as I think about you living in that apartment or working in that cubicle, you're explaining the first 5 years of any coach's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And as we sit here today, you look at that beautiful facility behind you, you got to be proud.
I am, but it didn't come without blood, sweat, and tears. And if everybody wants to build a pool, right? Everyone wants their own facility. They all do it, but how many actually will go through the hoops to get it done? I'm living proof that it's possible. There are several others now around the country that are popping up, swim centers. They're building pools. We're going to build number 3. It's going to be bigger than these two. More deck space. As crazy as that sounds, we want more debt. My wife and I, let's just take on more debt. Come on, let's do it. We want to do it from a meet standpoint, to be able to host larger meets where we can have invites and bring in some teams from around the area, from around the country. Hey, come on down. We're going to do prelim finals and such. You're invited, and that's exciting for the kids. Right now I can put about maybe 200 kids or so per session in the pool you see in the background, with the deck space that we have. What's helpful right now is the warmer weather. We could put the kids outside, keep everything still safe. But going forward, we're about a year away or so from number 3, but that's going to be, I've got 20 feet. I'm going to have 20 feet of deck space along both ends, both sides of a 50-meter pool, 20 feet on the 25-yard end and 15 feet on the other end. So that's going to be a ton of deck space. I'll get bleachers on both sides, and I'm excited, really excited for that facility. So
that's going to be really neat. Talk to us about that first pool that you built. You essentially built it to get as many athletes into the pool. You had your lesson pool there with it, and it was really bare bones just to get it up and running, right? And then it started to thrive. So what are some of the things that you did to keep programming running through the facility to make sure that revenue kept coming in?
It's funny. I was never nervous prior to opening up that location in any part of the process until about 2 weeks before we opened. And then the reality hit, because it looks good on paper. You can do all the figures, you can be all the confidence in the world inside of you that you're going to make things happen. But once it starts getting close and you realize that you're roughly a $50,000 a month or so mortgage, not counting property taxes, not counting utilities, not counting salaries, not counting hourly wages, not counting whatever else think of out there, about a $50,000 just for the mortgage for the next 20, 25 years, $50,000 a month, which means if you average $100 a month for tuition, let's just for easy math per swimmer, let's just make the math easy. I would need 500 swimmers at $100 a month just to cover the mortgage, not to cover anything else. And so that's what got me scared at that point. And what I had to think about was, how do I make my big pool more like my small pool in terms of margins? How are we going to pay the bills? You can't make a swim team work financially. And by the way, we don't do fundraisers. We've never done a swimathon. I don't like them. They're called begathons. I don't like swimathons. I don't like assessing parents halfway through a season. Oh, by the way, you have to charge this now. This is going to be more money. I don't like any of that stuff. We don't have mandatory volunteer hours. Think about that. Mandatory volunteer, right? There's no such thing. We don't have those for our families. This is what you pay per month. Here's the tuition structure. If you want to get involved and help us time during some meets, awesome. You don't want to, That's cool too. You can stay in the background, pick up, drop off. You can hang on the pool deck. You can sit in the bleachers, whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter to me. I'm happy that you're here. Glad you're part of the program. So I'm sitting there. How do I make the big pool more like the small pool? Well, at the time, my son was 6.5 years old. My daughter was 3. And we had them in little gym. We had them in soccer. We had them in, my son was in t-ball, whatever, all these activities. And I said to myself, when I would take him and her to these places, my wife, I'd say, there's no way I would come more than once a week to something like this. Once a week. Yet here we are in our model of swimming, thinking that every 7-year-old out there is going to be in a group that's 5 days a week or 4 or 3 days, even 3 days a week. If you understand parenting and you understand having small children, number one, you're never going to get any place on time ever again when you have a couple of kids, right? Because you're always going to be late. So when you're coaching and you're on that pool deck and you see that 8-year-old come into that practice because your lanes are perfect, you've got 5'5", you're symmetrical, and I'm an OCD guy. I love when my lanes are perfect. And then you get that one kid that walks in late and you go, oh, my lanes are destroyed. Okay, get in lane, whatever, right? Instead of taking that mindset, be grateful that this kid just walked in, because you don't know what that parent has been going through on any level to get their child to a swim practice or a swimming lesson semi on time, right? You don't know if they just left dialysis or they just left the hospital because they've got a parent with ALS. You just don't know these things, right? So if you come from that position of love and compassion and empathy, it really helps from a day-to-day standpoint to understand, because you don't know what they're going through, right? So but no program swim team can survive financially without doing those things I mentioned that we don't do. If you've got a whole pool full of national caliber type kids or state champion type kids, or even double B's and above, because you can't give them enough water time and you can't charge them enough to compensate for that water time and the coaching time to pay your bills. It's just the math. It's mathematically, unless you've got a sweet lease deal that you're only paying $1,000 or $2,000 a month or so to use an entire facility of at least 6 or 8 lanes, you're going to be okay, right? But most places, the lane rental is going up. It costs a lot to use facilities. How do you make the best out of these facilities? Well, for us, 54% of our program, people look at Nitro and they think, oh, it's such a big team. They're just large. They're good at age group championship meets because they're just such a big team. 54% of our kids are once or twice a week swimmers. Once or twice a week. And I've got programs that are set up to be once a week. They don't get to pick. I don't put them in a group of 4 times a week and you can pick one. It's you pick your day, you pick your time. Just like we do for soccer, just like we do for t-ball, just like we do for little gym and kindergarten, and all those things that are out there, music lessons and scouts. It's amazing to me, and I know the coaches out there are going to feel this, when you get emails or conversations with parents. Hey, can you change the practice time on that group? Because my son's got his violin lesson at that time. Okay, so and I keep my cool, right? Are you crazy? I don't get that kind of answer to a parent. But let's change the practice time for a group of kids when you've got an algorithm that works for your pool, where this group is here, this group is there, here's their lanes, it's a giant jigsaw puzzle. But we're going to go ahead and change that practice time because of your violin lesson. How about this? I know it sounds kind of crazy. How about ask your violin teacher to change that lesson time for that one violin student? So that's what kind of, so we make sure we have practice times in there. It's Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays. We got twice a week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Tuesdays and Thursdays, and even Fridays and Saturdays. Because you walk into any class, any grade, any 3rd grade class in the USA, ask a group of 3rd graders, how many of you love to swim? Every hand. Maybe 1 or 2 might not go up because they're embarrassed because they don't know how to swim yet, possibly, right? But most hands are up in the air. Okay, hands down. How many want to swim 6 days a week for the next 15 years of your life including Christmas vacation and spring breaks and Easters and summers, 2-a-days, whatever, you're going to get one kid with the bleached out hair that's already doing it, right? Yeah, man, that's me. But nobody else wants that. So what do? Well, reserve some lanes, cut some lanes off and reserve them for those once or twice a weekers, and get a coach on that group who loves to teach kids, who loves it, who smiles, who's exciting, who is excitable, where the kids will smile. And when you ask any kid, hey, how many folks felt like coming today? Nobody does. They don't want to come, right? But at the end of the practice, hey, how many feel better now than when you walked in? Who feels better now than when you walked in? You know what it's like when you work out, right? Every hand's up. So right then you capture them. You say, kids, hey, remember this feeling. Remember this feeling when it's time to come to practice again. Because here's how you grow your program. You don't grow your program by trying to get new kids all the time. You grow your program by keeping your kids, and they tell others to come. That's how you grow a program. So instead of this constant recycling bin going over and over and over of old kids out, new kids in, old kids, it's just normal. They quit. Is it really normal? It shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be. But you can teach them to love fitness and love the endorphin release that they don't understand yet, and love the fact that they feel that their grades will be better when they're swimming. It amazes me. We get like tests, you get the statewide testing, you get these emails, hey, they won't be here because of testing tomorrow. No, that's wrong. Bring them because of testing tomorrow. Bring them. Studies show, so that's what we do in terms of creating a product on a daily basis where kids want to be a part of it. And you're excited to see someone. If some kid walks in late, I say to him, 4 words. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. Hey, here's warm up. Jump in that line right there, finish up. When they stop, you stop. Whatever it is. I'm glad you're here. You don't know if you might be the only person that day that said that to that kid. The only one that acknowledged that, wow, you're not a burden right now. Man, I'm glad you're here. Hey, Joey, how's that class going? You told me about that art class you liked. Is it going pretty good? How'd that ceramic pot come out? Hey, how'd that math test work out? I didn't do too good. That's all right. If you need some help at all, let me know. Whatever. Of course, I'm not good, probably past 3rd or 4th grade on the math nowadays. Math has gotten harder.
Mike, one thing that, your staff will say about you, and I certainly agree with them in this regard, is that you're very pragmatic and you're very rational, logical when it comes to problem solving. And we could hear a lot of it right there. One of the things that resonated with me there is that, number one, parents and athletes are your customers. You're going to build a relationship bigger than that, but you treat your parents and athletes as customers. Why is that so important to long-term success?
Well, I do it because I appreciate it. I appreciate being treated that way when I'm other places. I appreciate, right now I'm not going to, I guess I will. Lifetime Fitness. I'm a member of Lifetime Fitness. If it's a pretty big health club chain. I also have a membership at Gold's Gym based on where I am in the city where I'm driving, so I still get my workout in, right? I don't do a lot. I just do maybe 45 minutes total, but I love to get that fix. Again, it's the endorphins, right? To keep me going, it keeps me grounded and keeps me sane. Most of the time at Gold's Gym, I'm not acknowledged. I'm not even acknowledged, but I've come to expect that. So when I'm walking out and if somebody actually says, hey, have a great day, glad you came in, it catches me by surprise, right? At Lifetime, there's a pretty good core group of people that have been there for a while, the Lifetime that I use in the Austin area. And I know them by name. There's Patty and there's also Robert, both them. Hey, Mike, how are you? I like that Cheers feel, like the old show Cheers. When you walk in, Norm, I appreciate that, right? And I know that people do appreciate that. And people know if you're BSing, if you're not. And kids are a better detector, I think, than adults. And a group of swimmers in front of you, if you're a coach who doesn't necessarily want to be there that particular day because something's on your mind, or maybe you don't want to be there for several days in a row, maybe you shouldn't be coaching anymore. You know, it just might be one of those times if you do, the kids know that. They sense it and they can tell, and they'll start talking to each other. And I don't ever want that to happen. I don't think you'll ever, I don't think I'd ever be accused of, oh my gosh, he didn't want to be here. You know, whatever's happening in our real lives, and we all have baggage, we've all got things happening, we've all got parents are getting sick and, you know, other issues that we deal with. My staff will tell you that when we pull in our parking lot and you shut that car door, the problems stay inside your car. You walk in that door and you walk on that pool deck, it is lights, camera, action. We are no longer there for us. We are here for the folks in front of us. Now, I've got a niece who's a Rockette up in, Rockette up in Radio City Music Hall, right? They didn't have a year this year because of the COVID, but she's one of the Rockettes. And that some days they'll do 3 shows. And if you've ever seen a Rockette show, you ever seen a show?
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. They're amazing, right? And it's costume changing, back on costume. Well, by the 3rd show on a Saturday or Sunday, you know, like they have a couple matinees and they got an evening show. You got to think that they're dragging, and their legs are, you know, hurting, and their toes are hurting, their ankles are getting cramped up, whatever, right? And just like Michael Jordan, I know it's a weird parlay going from the Rockettes to Michael Jordan, but Michael Jordan was asked in his prime, even his later in the career, how do you get up for a regular season game? You know you're going to make the playoffs. You got a pretty good shot at winning the NBA Finals. How do you get up for, you know, going to Charlotte on a road game, or Orlando Magic for a road game, or, you know, whatever, Denver Nuggets, mile high, you're breathing hard, you know, trying to keep up with the oxygen levels. How do you get up for a regular season game? And you know what Michael Jordan's answer was? Michael Jordan says, I know that somewhere in the crowd that someone's there seeing me for the first time ever. Someone's watching me for the first time ever. And I'm going to give them whatever I can give them. Now, here's a fact that I've heard. I cannot verify this, so no one pin me on this statistic. But at any point, you can assume that 20% of the kids in front of you that you're coaching are contemplating leaving. On any day, 20% are either going to a different team or being the 74% that quit by the time they're 15 years old in the youth sports, right? Which is a across the board statistic. At any point on any day, 1 out of 5 of the kids in front of you are thinking about leaving you. Leaving you. They don't leave the program, they leave you. Now, the only thing is, you don't know which 1 out of 5. You don't know. So now, assume that every one of those kids in front of you are thinking this might be their last practice ever for you. How would you coach that day? If you knew that, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my entire group today if I don't bring my A game, right? Because you don't know who the 1 out of 5 are. How would you coach that day? Would you give them a little bit more attention? Yes or no? Would you?
100%.
Would you be a little more on your toes, a little more energetic, a little more happy, a little more positive, a little more, dude, we got this, man? Would you? Yes or no?
Oh my gosh.
So
without a doubt.
So when my niece is getting ready for her 3rd show for the Rockettes, they're all getting fired up. Come on, man, we got this. We got this, right? Michael Jordan is playing in front of somebody who has never seen him before. All right. If you knew USA Swimming was coming into video and to put you on their website, hey, we're going to show Mike Murray, Victor Aquatic Club, as a Victor Swim Club, right? Victor Swim Club. We're going to show Mike Murray in his practice today, whatever the date is. I'm not going to say because it'll date this video. And Mike, 3, 2, 1, boom, you're on camera, go. Tell me you wouldn't coach maybe a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
You've got, Jack Roach decides to show up, to watch you coach a practice right now. He's sitting in the bleachers, and by the way, I got a funny story real quick. Side note, Eddie Reese came out to see our practice a few times. And one of the times he came out, it was, I think Will Lycombe was still swimming with us. And he came out on a Saturday morning, and he's where we said parents and coaches, coaches and swimmers only beyond this point. Well, I come out there on Saturday morning, and I see there's Eddie over there where the coaches were supposed to be, no parents, right? And so one of my coaches comes in, Chuck McClune, who coached me when I was 16. He's one of my coaches here. We're coaches for Nitro. And so Chuck walks, I go, oh man, coach. I go, Chuck, I said, we got like, I think it's a grandfather, a parent. See that guy over there in the corner? Don't worry. I'll get him. And he just beelines over to kick Eddie Reese off our deck, right? And I'm nudging the other coach. I'm going, guys, watch this. Chuck's gonna go try to kick Eddie off the deck. And he gets about 3 feet from him, and he makes a U-turn and realizes it's him and books off. And Eddie later found out about it. And Eddie said, Chuck, you should have done it, and I would have played along with you. And that's classic Eddie. Eddie, because then I would have been going, no, it's Eddie Reese, don't do that, So that's a funny story. So,
that's a great story, though, man. I'm glad you said that one's going to be a clip.
Yeah, we always got stories.
Mike, that's a great story, and like I said, we'll have Dan clip that one up. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is we were talking about workouts one day, and I can't remember if this was at an ASCA board meeting or if it was at a meet where we were together. But somebody was saying, like, how can you make such a practice that's so challenging fun? And you said, if it was a 15,000-yard set, you can better believe I'd make it fun. And you mentioned that at every workout, you try to get at least 2 or 3 pieces of feedback to every kid in the pool. Is that something that you're talking about to your staff on a weekly basis?
Yeah, that goes back to just individual attention. And that goes back to as much as even when that one boy will come in a little bit late or one little girl and you say, hey, I'm glad you're here. That counts to me. That counts as a touch. Hey, how'd that geometry thing go? How'd your project go in history? That's a touch, because you've got to make sure you're making contact with the folks. Now, there's days that I'll have, and again, it's funny, I call myself head coach, but I don't really have a group anymore. I'm more like a manager, I guess. I'm the great uncle. I'm the happy uncle that visits the groups. And like last night, I covered 2 of our beginner groups because one of our coaches were out of town. So, hey, Mike, can you cover these groups? No problem, I've got them. So I'll cover those groups. And I do that with excitement. I can't wait to get in there. And if you ever showed up at Nitro and I didn't know you were coming, if you knew which location I was at, you'd walk in the pool deck. Where's Mike? You'd look, I'd be in the lessons pool, either teaching kids or teaching the teachers, or I'd be at the shallowest end of our pool working with the developmentals. Usually the kids go on 4th or so in the lane, trying to help them along. That's kind of that's where I tend to gravitate towards, right? But it was I think my exact quote to you was, I can make 10 500s exciting.
That's exactly what you said.
And it's funny, I mentioned that set again today when I did my 4 500s to one of my coaches. He says, I stole that set from you. And we had 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, even B-level swimmers that we would have an hour and a half with them, and we would go 10 500s, about once every 2 or 3 months. Normally I would do it where we go, it's an hour and a half. So we go, the first 5 are on 9 minutes. That's doable.
Oh yeah.
Potty break, come back. The last 5 are on 8 minutes. And number 10 is going to be off the blocks. Right? It's like, oh, it's crazy. That's old school. That's, you're punishing it.
I see value.
We're not punishing it, right? And if what you're looking for is, hey guys, I'm looking for whoever can nail 19 of the best turns I've ever seen. I'm talking fast approaches, coming off tight as an arrow, and we're going to go past the 3rd line, or if you have no lines in your bottom, put little weights down there, cones or something, and make a certain distance point they got to get past and still hold their streamline. And maybe you might want to add, your first breath is on the 2nd touch. Once you do your breakout, touch, then you can take your breath, whatever it is. You can set it your own parameters. And after every one, you're gonna mention the top 3 kids. Kids will clamor for that attention. You know what it says? Recognition. I think they say babies cry for it and grown men will die for it. In service, they die for the medal of valor, the Medal of Honors, right? Babies cry for it. Grown men will die for it. Recognition. And you start recognizing these kids and you get them excited about 10 500s. And they're really not that bad, honestly. But what I like to do is I would time it and do it about 2 weeks or so, or a week before a meet where I've got most of my kids entered in a 500. So now, before they go to their blocks for the meet, hey guys, huddle up, real quick huddle. Come here. Remember 2 weeks ago? How many did we do? 10. How many is this? It's 1. It completely changes the mindset of a 500, which most 10 or 11-year-olds, they just will slug through it because they do 20 lengths, you get a counter, hey, I did it, but they're not really truly swimming a 500. They're doing it, they're finishing it, but they're not swimming it, right? You do sets like that every 2 or 3 months. It doesn't have to be often, even once a month, you could probably do it and pull it off. You can make sets like that exciting, but it really goes back to, there was an article, it was an ASCA article on deliberate and purposeful practices. And I think that might even be the title of it. I think it might be deliberate practices or purposeful practices. And you got Coach A and Coach B. And Coach A says, all right, guys, let's do 1,000 right now. Work on your turns. Leave on top. Okay. Coach B says, hey, everybody, we have the opportunity for 39 of the absolute best turns that I've ever seen. In fact, I'd like each turn to be better than the one before. A better approach, a better setup, get those feet planted, get off that wall quickly. We're gonna do underwaters to such and such a point, 2 touches, first breath, 3 touches, first breath, whatever, right? And oh, by the way, that's 1,000 yards. Leave on top. Let's see what you can do here. Now, that just took maybe 20 more seconds. But does the group get more? Do you think the group could get more out of that 20 extra seconds of explanation? He wants every turn to be better than the one before it. I can put together 39 great turns. I love this one with our groups. I'm the guest coach. I show up. Hey, folks, how would you love it if Coach Allison said, hey, you know what, guys, today we're going to work on turns. We're going to work on turns today. Everybody goes, yay! And all the little kids start jumping. Kids are jumping, right? Even older kids, national level kids, they'd love to have a practice. All you do is work on turns. Okay, guess what? We're going to go 8 sets of 5 100s right now, or 3 sets of whatever it is. And you count up how many turns in your head. Okay, you got 21 turns there. You got 28 turns there. You got 20, whatever. You got a chance right now for 76 turns in this next set. And it just reframes what you really want to work on. And you've got to pick something that you want to focus on to make these kids better in front of you during that time. And our mission statement at Nitro, most mission statements around the country are, here at such and such, we empower children to be the best they can be through the sport of swimming, blah, blah, it's that you hear the same mission statement. A mission statement needs to be what you want to accomplish every day. That's your mission statement. What is it? Right. And I was never a really big mission vision guy, but I'm listening to the Wharton School of Business on Sirius XM, and they got a great program called Moneyball, and it's sports and business. And I highly recommend it. It's on a couple times a day. And so I'm driving, listening to Moneyball, and someone's talking about mission statements. And they said, if you don't have one that it's easily recitable, you should be able to know it. And if it's not what you want to get accomplished every single day, then change it and write a new one. And so I went home, and honest to goodness, it took me probably 2 minutes to put this one together. It's 9 words and it's 3 sentences. I think you know this already. You know our mission statement. Visible improvement, period. Delivered with passion and joy, period. Every day.
It's great.
That's it. And so ask our coach next time you see a Nitro coach, hey, what's your mission statement at Nitro? Hopefully they'll get it, right? Most of them know it because I'll ask them, hey, what's the mission? Visible improvement. Do you believe you made these kids better looking in the water? Do they look better now at the end than when you got them today? Yes. Did you deliver the practice with passion and joy? Yes or no? And I can tell, yeah. Awesome. Congratulations. You accomplished the mission for the day. And if you can string those along, do it for 1 practice. Then try to do it for 2 practices. Start with a set as a coach. Just do it for 1 set. Just do it for 1 set. then do it for 2 sets. The next thing you know, you'll have a nice string. And then what happens at the end of a season at a championship type meet, there really, really shouldn't be too many surprises. There really shouldn't be, for young kids, for age groupers, because you're not going to rest and, that kind of stuff. Take that pressure off. But if they're doing what they should be doing, they're age groupers. They should be getting faster.
No doubt about it.
you
Mike,
can
one thing that I wanted to ask you to that end, and we'll do our quick fire questions after this. This has been an awesome episode. Here, I'm going to stroke our ego for a minute. Here you and I are, we're on the ASCA board. We're ASCA level 5 coaches. Our programs have produced national teamers. I'm in the water every day for 2 hours with 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. And I know you do lessons too in the water. Why is it that we have a stigma that as we progress as coaches, we have to leave that part behind? Because for me, number one, it's part of my daily fitness is that I get in the pool and I'm teaching lessons. And number two is I'm reminded every day of what I'm actually doing that provides a whole lot of lifelong value to these young athletes and not solely focused on who our next national teamer is going to be. What is it that there's a stigma, right? That as a lot of coaches progress, they feel like they have to leave that part of their progression as a coach behind. Why has that remained so important to you?
I think I've never really thought about it until just now. Honest to goodness, the way you framed it. What happens is, yes, we have our age group coach of the year award with the ASCA World Clinic every single year. That's pretty much it. That's it for an age group coach. You got one shot out of thousands and thousands of coaches. If you happen to get the votes, however it works, I can't even tell you with a formula how to become the age group coach of the year. I've never been it, right?
Yeah.
There's a recognition standpoint, it seems like, in that when you get those Olympians and you get the NCAA champions, it seems like, yep, it's because I coached them. I'm going to kind of burst a few bubbles out there, and I hope I don't really offend, but I don't think that much of it has to do with the coaching. I think a lot of it has to do, yes, you can put that environment, you can get that culture, the daily culture, what you're doing and doing the right things in practice. But you have to have the athletes that walk in those doors that have the basic genetic makeup and code of talent to take that program to the top level.
That's right.
We had a really, really strong year, 2015.
Yes.
Because we were blessed with Taylor Abbott, Sean Grisham.
Beast. I had him at a couple camps, man. He was a beast.
Chris Yeager. Tim O'Brien actually brought these guys in. It was because Tim was part of this program. These guys moved and they wanted to swim for Tim. I don't think it was just Tim O'Brien, because these guys walked on our pool deck already at a level. I don't know. I don't have nothing to take away from Ken Heiss at Mason Manta Rays. He had the Foster brothers. Did you create the Foster brothers, or were the Foster brothers already created and you helped mold a few things to really take to the next level? Shane Cassis is such a late bloomer, came out of a program without really having a program. He was getting workouts from Tim from our program, emailed to him and sent to him, and he was trying to do it on his own. He stayed with us up here for one summer, and he said it was the best summer he ever had training. Well, it's probably the first summer he ever had training. I think maybe if Shane was any place, it would have been just as good, So, that's part of the answer to you. Why do I tend to gravitate towards the youngers is they still laugh at my jokes, and they're horrible jokes. Honestly, I say the same. For me, I laugh. They're funny to me, right? They still respect you. They're scared of you when you, that's not what and they'll do what you want them to do. They're still squirrely, which I love. I love their eyes are so bright. A lot of those younger kids, they haven't been tainted yet, and they haven't been beat down yet by the real world. I love being around that. I love the purity of being around these young kids and coaching them and being in the water and helping them and seeing the parents going, who's the old guy in the water? Oh, that's Mike. He's the owner of Nitro. He's the owner? Why is he with my 6-year-old right now? That's really cool. And also, Mike, it sends a great message to the rest of the staff. Wow, why is Mike down there in the water with these young kids? Why is he spending time in the lessons pool? Why is, also I know what butters my bread, honestly, it's you got to get out of the feeder, right? That's a lot of it. But I get such a high level of satisfaction when you can take a kid in a 45-minute developmental practice, and for the first time, they just got the side breathing down and that head stays in the water for the breathing. And then you praise the heck out of it. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, you're going to demonstrate right now. You want to demonstrate? You literally can change a person's life in one practice with what you have to say to them. These are the kids who are going last in line, never had a chance to demonstrate. They're not your front runners, but they're the ones that get some recognition. I love that. Why don't we have recognition for the coaches of the world that keep the retention of their team from one season to the next, that those same kids all come back, that those kids were not even ranked at all in terms of a level. Now they just made 74% of the kids now are B swimmers, and they were not even a C level, below B until then. Boom, now they're B. Holy mackerel. Do you realize you took 38% more of your kids and they're double B now in this next season you just did? That, to me, those are coaches who are in the trenches working their buns up. How do you recognize those coaches? That'd be pretty cool.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And it's so important to keep that connection to the younger athletes in your program. And you mentioned something, because we were talking about the business of the sport today, is those lesson programs so integral to the long-term success of any program. Are you ready for
the average lesson price for a group lesson in the country is about $80 or so for a month, about $20 for half an hour for a group lesson. That's average across the country. Some places higher, some places lower. 20 is pretty much the sweet spot, right? $20 for half an hour per swimmer. What's that per hour? That's $40, right? Per hour per swimmer. Now you have more overhead because you've got teachers now with smaller ratios. You've got deck folks. You've got software. You've got front desk people. All that stuff works part of your lessons program. But at that margin, if you ever put pen and paper to your highest level performing group in your program for the whole month, divide it up and see what they're paying per hour. The highest tuition that they're paying more than anybody, right? Your highest level, they're paying more per month. But when you break it down per hour, I'm going to guess it'll be around $3, maybe $2.76, maybe $3.15. It's going to be right around that area, I believe, is where it's probably going to be, or even less than that. So now, can you make a living and give a staff or give yourself health insurance and a decent standard of living where you can actually go get a car once in a while and treat your family out to a dinner and make sure your son or daughter can get piano lessons? Can you do that if your whole pool's full of $2.76 an hour per hour kids? You can't. You just can't. And so we can be criticized. Oh, they talk about business. How many swim programs are out of business this year? No, not pandemic. That's not fair. The year before, in 2019, how many are no longer around because they couldn't pay their bills? 2018, how many pools are closing? That's a pandemic. Across the country.
No doubt about it.
Pools are closing. So I don't apologize for running a business. If I don't run the business, there's no championship medals. There's no meets. There's no college scholarships for anybody.
That's right.
You got to make sure you run your business. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I love it. That's such an important answer. And that's an episode that we should do a couple months down the road, because I think teaching people how to set up a long-term revenue stream with consistent lesson programs and the ability to expand is what's going to keep your program moving forward. I don't care how good your last swimmer was.
Right. Even if you don't even have a lessons program, remember when I said I pull this out of the road, my head's on my hands, and I'm thinking, think, how can you make a regular swim pool more like a lessons program without necessarily even having to do lessons? We could sustain ourselves with just a swim team because over half of our kids are those recreational, developmental, that want to come once or twice a week. And some of those kids will become swimmers. Most won't. And that's okay. Find the coach who loves teaching.
No doubt about it. All right, Mike, here we go. The quick fire questions. Are you ready?
Are these the same questions every single time?
Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes they're different. It depends.
Oh, you're throwing some curveballs at me. I'll do as best I can. Go ahead.
All right, first one. The Nitro coaching staff need their own closet for Nitro t-shirts.
They need their own closet?
Yeah. You guys have every variation of t-shirt I've ever seen.
Our colors aren't purple at all. This was a summer. Let me show you the back of this thing. Copyright infringement.
Nice. Nice.
I got Kool-Aid Man on the back. So
yeah, you guys have every variation.
Keep it fresh.
Will it take a sub 21 second performance in Tokyo to win the gold medal in the men's 50 free?
Oh, I have no idea. As long as it's Caleb Dressel or somebody else wearing stars and stripes, I'm happy.
It's going to be unbelievable, man. There's so many people in the mix. It's going to be an incredible race.
Story about Caleb Dressel, Jason Kolinog, who coached him at Bowles. He's now at A&M.
Yes.
He told me a story that Caleb Dressel could get a running start at Bowles. Well, kids don't do this at home, right? He'd get a running start on the pool deck. He could do a somersault in the air and hit the flags with his hand.
I don't doubt it. I mean, athletic. It's unbelievable. Yeah. All right. Does Ledecky break 8 minutes in the women's 800 free?
She's phenomenal. I don't know. What's her best right now? What's her lifetime best?
03.
Okay. I'm an optimist. I'm going to say I'd love to see it. Likelihood, I don't know. Ledecky, I just used her as an example from an Olivier story. Sorry, I'm making your rapid fire questions not so rapid fire, but I want to share this with coaches to share with their team. Ledecky fails every single day in practice. She, according to Gemmel, Bruce Gemmel said when she was at NCAP, before she went to Stanford, she would fail every day. She knew she had to go a certain speed in practice to be able to do what she wants to do in a swim meet. If there were 10 reps, she would start out, boom, until she falls off. And she would just, her tank is empty after 6. She comes back the next day, want to try it again. Next day, want to try it again. Took her, she gets it. But she fails every day. And that's a lot of our kids and coaches too. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid. He says, embrace it, man. Ledecky fails every single day. Love that.
I think a lot of our athletes, parents are afraid of their kids' failure more than our kids are afraid of failing in practice.
Good point. Good point.
That's where we're trying to do a lot of education. So I appreciate you saying that and getting into that.
It's Olivier's, one of his maybe 2 or 3 articles ago, his emails. It's all about Ledecky and Lochte for that very reason.
We bought Conquer the Pool for our team, and Greg Perini bought it for the team at Denison. It's a really important piece that Oliver did, and we love it.
Yep.
Mike, who's going to be the breakout star of these trials, do you think? Who's kind of a name that maybe not a lot of people have heard of that you're personally excited about?
Shane Cassis. Shane Cassis is going to be put on the map. And I hope he doesn't even watch this, because I don't want the pressure on him. I don't want the pressure. That's why I'm really careful on how I answer these questions. I don't want the pressure on these folks. They get articles written about them and then the comments come out. And there's always the trolls. No matter what you say or do, there's always gonna be people taking shots at you. And these are just athletes, and they're just such great people. But Shane Cassis, the last cover of Swimming World said, I think it's like the greatest swimmer you never heard of. People don't know this guy.
Yeah, Swim had something up that said, and I never write on Swim anything. I was compelled to write on this one. How fast will Shane Cassis swim at trials? I just wrote as fast as he wants to.
Yep.
He's going to crush it.
Yep. It's funny.
Mike,
his mom emailed me about 2 other brothers that swam down in his area from Mission, Texas, where he's from. And they wanted to come up, and they're coming up for the summer to hang out with us for a summer to train. I just got the copy of Swimming World that day in the mail with Shane on the cover. And so I shot an email back. I said, hey, I've got the Swimming World with Shane on the cover. Would you like, oh my gosh, I'd love that. And so I mailed it to her. So now she has her copy of Shane on the cover, her own son. She didn't have it. So,
Mike, what are you most excited about American swimming moving forward?
well, it's tough coming out after the Phelps era, right? Michael, I mean, everyone knows Michael Phelps. Non-swimmers know Michael Phelps. The average non-swimmer out there still doesn't know Caleb Dressel, still doesn't know Katie Ledecky. If you want to say what I'm most excited about, probably ISL, probably the continuation of ISL. And as this is reborn, it continues to move forward and gets retooled to go forward, what they're going to make with it. I think it's really cool what Constantine has done with this. And I read a long article about him, and I didn't realize he was up against what he was up against in terms of the global powers trying to, shut him down on certain things. And I think the ISL is super exciting. And if you've never seen an ISL meet and you're listening to this telecast or broadcast, find a way to go see it live. You've got to see it live. The music and the lights and the spotlights and the relays and, the team names are awesome. Energy Standard, so out there,
LA Current.
LA Current, the Cali Condors, DC Trident, you've got New York Breakers, Andrew's team. I just think I got goosebumps right now just talking about this. It is so cool. They've packaged swimming for the non-swimmer, I guess.
Yeah, you mentioned Shane Cassis. I mean, how about Beryl Gastrodello? I mean, I did not know much about her other than she swam at Texas A&M, was good, but I watched the ISL and I'm like, this woman might make an impact at the Olympic Games. So that's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, I can't recall the Japanese foreign IMer.
Seto?
Yes. Phenomenal. It was a man against boys, and the boys were world class.
Yep.
And I saw Seto just, are you kidding me? And it's every stroke.
Yeah.
Every stroke. And I watched it in Vegas. I got a chance to watch the day one in Vegas. In the pool, it was glass. They had the glass wall. So you could actually, when they dive in, you're watching underwater right in front of them. You got above and below the water. It was a phenomenal product. They've got this thing down. Love the ISL. Love it.
And then, Mike, I would want to finish up with, do you know what episode of Coach's Corner has been the longest?
I talk too much. Gotta be this one. Sorry, folks. I talk a lot.
No, man, this was awesome. And I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it. And I'm glad it was not during an ASCA board meeting. We have a lot of exciting things to come with ASCA. I know that there are so many passionate folks. It's great to have so many great coaches on there. And we really appreciate your leadership. So thank you for being on today.
I want to add one thing then. If anybody is interested in serving on the board of ASCA, all you've got to be is a member of ASCA and talk to a few people at the World Clinic. The clinic this September is going to be in Orlando. You don't need to be there for all 7 days or 8 days of it. I would say if you're going to break away from your program, I know it's tough to do that sometimes, but just go there for Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Pick those 3 days, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Pick the days where you can find what you want to see. And the coolest thing about this is the old Justice Aquatic Center is now called the Rosen Center. I might be called Rosen Aquatic Center. I don't know if it is or not. The guy that owns the big hotel that we are going to be at, the Rosen, also owns the Justice Aquatic Center. And so we're going to have in-water presentations and athletes, and you're going to walk away with this thing. If you're not there, you're going to go, oh my gosh, I wish I would have been there in person live. We're also
it's a great opportunity for coaches to take their families to Florida in the fall.
Yep, Orlando.
Yep.
So it's a great place, within minutes of everything. And but I think this will be the best World Clinic ever. And I'm not saying it just from hyperbole. It really will be. I love having that in-water component that you're going to have. I'm assuming you're going to have Dressel there. I'm hoping, Caleb and Greg Troy, and be able to watch these folks and what are they doing, and what is it that's you're going to walk away with a brand new toolbox of what you can take to your pool deck that night when you get back on there. So I appreciate what you're doing, man. I appreciate you.
Well, thanks so much, Mike. We appreciate you. And this episode will be available either later tonight or early tomorrow morning. We'll have it off across all of our social platforms. as well as on the Fitter and Faster website. Mike, we appreciate your time. Best of luck to you guys this summer. And I'm looking forward to catching up soon, buddy.
See you soon.
All right, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.